Welcome to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. And as always, I'm your host, Mario Bedouin. And today's guest is a man who knows how to move, and not just through the airports. He's a media sales strategist, a travel planning pro, and a marathoner who has taken his passion for running around the world. Quite literally. From our shared experience working at Expedia and Living Social to mapping out travel experiences that connect people with purpose, Neal Sheridan has been on the front lines of the online travel media revolution. But when he's not building brands or booking big deals, you'll find him lacing up his shoes and chasing pavement. He's run 4 marathons, including New York twice, Chicago, and Philly, with his eyes now set on hitting all 6 of the Abbott World Marathon majors. And for Neal, the race is only half the fun. The real adventure is planning the journey, where to stay, what to eat, and how to recover like a champion. From the start line in Staten Island to the finish in Central Park, Neal's got insights not just on running the 26.2, but on how to travel smart, plan right, and maximize the marathon moment. With tips for runners, brands, and cities alike, whether you're a casual jogger or training for your first big race, this one is for you. Follow Neal's journey on Instagram at Silver Fox Running USA. And if you're a brand looking to engage a passionate, purpose-driven community, take note, because the race isn't just on the course, it's in the marketing, the moments, and the memories we create. So hydrate, stretch it out, and lace up. But don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on all the socials, because Tickets to Travel starts now. Welcome to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. I'm your host, Mario Bedouin, and today we have a special guest, someone who I've actually worked with over the years. In particular, we have shared experience at this company called Expedia, and then we went on to work at a very big startup called Living Social, and I was in the travel portion of Living Social called Living Social Escapes. Neal Sheridan was at the media portion, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I think we have a unique situation here because I would consider you a travel professional in the space, but you're also very passionate about marathon running.
Yeah, that's correct. I've done 4 marathons in total. 3 actually have been majors. I've done New York twice and done Chicago and done Philly as well. I'm still itching to get back out there and do some more. But the experience of being in the marathons is like nothing else.
You're a little sidelined right now. You've got a broken hand, which doesn't really matter for marathons, obviously. But how do you approach this? Because you have to have been running seriously since when?
Yeah, so the passion for me for running all started years ago. Almost 50 years old right now, but the active lifestyle of running started probably when I was a teenager, and I actually ran varsity track and cross country all throughout high school. I actually ran in college as well. And then it teetered off a little bit afterwards, but then I got the itch back to start getting back into the running and the corporate challenges that they did out in New York City. And then really started to get into the New York Roadrunners Club, NewYorkRoadrunners.org. For those out there who are not in the New York area or in the New York area, it is a tremendous organization to get yourself active and competing in races that could be from, as I say, a 5K all the way up to, of course, the marathon that they actually own and operate with the city. I've actually been, as you say, running for probably 30 plus years competitively, and the passion is still there.
I feel like people always say they want to do a marathon, and then they think about how much training is involved. But you've done enough of these to understand the training, one, but also to go to different destinations to do the marathon. And so in terms of our audience, what we like to do is really look at the event itself and what goes into, one, planning travel for it, but also the preferences, because what you're essentially doing, if anybody were to stumble upon this podcast in particular, is they're probably an aspiring runner and they're like, you know what? I run for fun. It's a really big bucket list thing for me to do my first marathon. Neal, what was your first marathon and how did you plan it? Was it New York?
Yeah, so New York was my first marathon. Did that back in 2013. So luckily, being here in the local area, it wasn't much of a transit to get there. But even if you do live 25 or 30 or 50 miles outside of the city, that marathon actually starts over in Staten Island. So still it is a commute to get down to either the ferry or the bus that takes you over there. But my first true experience to actually go was in Chicago and ran that in 2015. There are a variety of ways that you can go and research to be part of the experience. You're not going to go there for one day. So, of course, you want to think about the majors out there, the majors that consist of Chicago, New York, Boston, Berlin, London, and Tokyo. There are travel and tourism ways, a marathon tour, I think a marathon travel and tours that actually is a destination that people can go to and be able to book it through, or you can literally do it on your own. Again, Mario, we worked at Expedia. That could be a way for you to book your travel. The thing is you want to do is, as you're going and doing these marathons, it's about the experience, right? You're not going there.
What I wanted to back you up on a little bit is, how did it feel doing your first one? When that gun goes off and you start running and you're like, I've got, 4 hours here? What goes through your head a little bit? Because I have my own challenges with running.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, what was the thought when you find, you're like, hey, I've been training for this for most of my life effectively, right? You said high school, college, and then doing a couple corporate runs. And then you're like, I'm going to do Chicago. And then once that gun goes off, what's the thought process of you getting your pacing going and just understanding that you have to be in the pocket?
I think there's a lot of mental preparation that goes on before you get to that starting line. Nobody's ever going to just show up at the marathon and run it. It's happened. But there is a whole process that you would go and build in terms of training, right? So you're going to look at it 3, 4, 5 months previous to when you're actually going to hit that start line and build up on the miles and training that you're going to do.
By that point, you're mentally prepared. This is just from osmosis, people that I know who have done it. You build up to, you never finish it, the whole 26 miles, but you get to a point where in the first month, you maybe do 10. So what's that typical training program look like for someone?
Yeah, so some of the elite runners out there, they're going to probably run up to 90 or 100 miles a week. And most of the amateur and regular individuals out there probably going to get to about 45 to 50 miles a week in total.
Okay.
Nobody's ever going to run a full marathon before they run the marathon. Usually it's about 20 to 22 miles is the longest run that they do. That typically happens about a month or so before the marathon occurs. Mentally, as you say, you're prepared when you hit that start line that this isn't going to be overbearing. This isn't going to be a task that I can't accomplish. Most of the individuals who are out there, and these majors, by the way, have 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people that run it. That's a great camaraderie out there for them to be part of. And it motivates them to get out there and you run and compete. And so people do it for causes. People do it.
So there's a kind of this inherent community. And so there's even this community. One, you're going through the action of being in the marathon, but there's all the buildup as well. And so as you are in it, about what point of the marathon did you start to maybe say, I'm getting a little tired, or I'm running by this pizza shop, I'd love to get a slice? Like, what goes through your head?
Yeah, I think people sometimes get mentally checked out, right? Within the marathon, 26.2 miles. They call the wall, which is where you get to mile 20, right? That's what they consider the wall, where people get to that point and try to push through that level. And depending on how many people who are spectating, it can keep you focused on the task at hand. And some people are there for the recreational aspect of it. Some people are there for the competitiveness to it. Me personally, I'm there for the competitive. But again, a community you mentioned before, huge community in the running. There's also ultra marathons that are out there that are 50, 100 miles, right? So There is a distinct difference, of course, between the individual who's looking to do the 5K, right, race. I am more of about a person who's advocates to get people out there to run, whether it's a mile, 5K, 5 miles, whatever it is. That you should get out there for exercise, for health, etc. But to your point in your question earlier, right, you could teeter out there in terms of the overall experience that you're going through. But it depends on who the individual is. They're mentally strong.
Yeah. I think everybody, they think about it, but to execute it and then go through the process of getting to this level where I'm going to hit all the majors.
Yeah.
What are the majors?
Yeah. So all the majors are, as I said before, London and Berlin, Tokyo, New York, Chicago, and Boston. Some of them you can qualify for, right, at your time. Some of them are a lottery. Most of them that you can do some type of charitable component to it in order to be part of the experience. They call this the 6 majors that are out there. There is, I believe it's actually Abbott is the sponsor for the 6 majors. You each get from one, Abbott Laboratories. And then it is a goal for an individual to run all of them. They run throughout the course of the year. It's difficult to probably do it in 1 year, but when people set their goal on one a year or whatever that is, right, to run it. And a marathon, listen, it does take a toll on you, on your body. The day after, you're a little sluggish. But
when I was at a TripAdvisor, my boss at the time had trained for the Boston. And he came back to the office and he was just so happy that he finished one. But man, he was like, couldn't even walk. And he had been training, like he'd done the whole program, but he's like that extra 5 miles or whatever, 10 miles. He's like, that was something that is hard to prepare for. So I remember him just popping pills, painkillers the entire time. And so you can't really prepare somebody for that, right?
Oh.
What was your experience like? Were you just laid up for a week afterwards or?
Yeah, after my first one, I think I went out like a cannon. Oh. And so I had no idea of how to manage the actual race because you think about you train and feel that you're invincible and put all that training behind you. And then you get to a point where you've gone too fast, right? Tortoise and the hare kind of experience in analogy.
So you wouldn't recommend like going fast and then like pacing yourself after a certain mile?
I would. Steady as you go. Yep.
Wins the race, as the
tortoise says. So the tortoise and the hare analogy is how you would run a marathon.
Yeah.
The next day, you're going to be sore no matter what. You've never run that much. You put a speed component into it as well, right? So you're now running. Most of your training is happening at a slower pace than at the pace that everybody else is going at during that. So you look at everybody running in front of you or to the side of you, right? And you want to stay in rhythm with them. So,
yeah, you don't want to get trampled. One, you also want to be respectful because you're competitive. You want to make sure that A, you finish, but B, you do it in a competitive time. Because I'm sure in terms of that, back to that community piece, there's a gathering at the end, maybe with friends and family. And then you start to really dig into the time and doing this retrospective, right? Of which mile you could have done better or something else. Is that true?
Very true. You hit the nail on the head on that one. I think when you do your first marathon, you have nothing to compare it to.
Sure.
So you think you can run it at X time based on your training, and then you get to it and you have a baseline, right, of what you're running. And then afterwards, now you have to start to figure out, okay, what did I do right and wrong? During there, what could I have done differently in my training? How did I feel within my training during the components of it? And so you started to look at it from a retrospective, as you stated. And then the next one, you try to utilize what you've accomplished during that first one and apply it to the next one to hopefully have a better time. Boston in itself does have a qualifying time to it. Now, most of these majors do as well in order to actually get a guaranteed entry into it. So you need to actually have a qualified time, and it's typically by age. The younger you are, the lower the time is. My best marathon was 3 hours and 11 minutes. My best half is
3 hours and 11 minutes? That's fast.
It was, I think I was 35 or 37 when I did it.
Okay.
Now trying to get back in terms of 3 and a quarter would be ideal for me. And if you're going into these majors, your age, depending on the actual race and which one, it could be higher or lower. When we talk about getting into and qualifying into an actual marathon, it doesn't mean that you actually hit the standard time. You actually have to be lower than the actual standard time.
Got it. Which ones of these majors do you have to qualify for all of them?
Not all of them. Boston actually is one of the ones that you actually do need to qualify for. The other ones are very selective in terms of it because there's only a limited amount of entries accepted. Yeah. New York has 50,000 or plus, so it's the largest. But then if you look at all these other majors, London's very tight.
You can't have 50,000 people running through the streets, or else it would just be a mess, obviously. But so there is a capacity thing.
There is. And the same thing they actually do with Boston. There's a capacity, but there's also the other layer of having a qualified standard time. So they put out every year the actual standard time by age group. And there's men and women, of course. It's very competitive to get in. So there's only a select number of entries that they accept per age group and per gender.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because then I always think about it in terms of travel, right? So you have capacity. And then you always look at, because back in the day, I used to manage New York City for Expedia. And so obviously that first weekend in November is always sold out, and because it draws people from all over the world to come and participate in this. As a runner, and you've been in different destinations, what was your preference? One, maybe to book the travel, but do you want to be really close to where you need to start the race? Or is it like, how do you approach the planning of your travel when you're going to be in the event?
Yeah, good question. Most of these marathons, there is some type of expo.
That's like the fanfare around it. And so it's typically at the end?
No, so the expo happens either in New York, actually, it's leading up to it. So they have vendors there that have all part of the running community and running organization. So they'll have your rollers, the depression guns, the massage guns that exist out there. So all the vendors have participation at these expos to talk to the potential marathon runners or their families, right?
And so are you saying you like to be close to that expo?
The expo is, in some cases, it's before the event.
Okay.
And then like in Philadelphia, it's leading up to the event. And so it's usually in a central location close to where the start line is in Philadelphia.
So it's like a conference, like a work conference.
You get your bib, you get your shirt. There's an experience that you go there and you learn a little bit maybe of the course and see videos of the course as well. So that is more of an experience leading up to it. To your question about like, where do you want to be from the start and finish? That depends on the event. So New York, is you have to take a bus out to it, but
because it's Staten Island,
it's in Staten Island where it starts.
And so for the novice like myself, you're going through every borough and it ends in Central Park.
That's correct. So most people plan to stay, say, Times Square or Central Park West or in that area where the actual event ends. And so the finish is, as you say, in Tavern on the Green in Central Park. But the buses that you need to take out to there are in Bryant Park. And then there's a ferry in the Staten Island Ferry that takes you across Staten Island as well. So
it's the best free trip to see the Statue of Liberty.
It is.
The Staten Island Ferry.
At 6 a.m. Yes, it is. But it is like in Chicago, you want to be close to Grant Park because that actually is where the start and finish is. So you typically are looking for hotels around the area. I think I had stayed at Virgin Hotel actually out in Chicago. And that was maybe a half a mile from where the actual starting and finish line was. That is perfect. Of course, when you fly in, you're flying into either O'Hare or Midway, depending on your destination. And that's about probably 40 minutes from central Chicago. But the hotel you want to be at is close by. So ideally, you want to be somewhat close in proximity because you don't want to do a lot of walking afterwards, right?
It's wherever you can get a wheelchair.
That would be ideal. But yes, in terms of where you're located, you want to be in at least close proximity to it. There is always some type of festivity that happens after the event. So you'll have to do some walking to get out of the location. There's always some type of, say, pomp and circumstance that happens as you're getting to that finish line, but you want to be in close proximity to where you're staying, to where the finish line is. I'm not so concerned about it. It's usually the finish line is probably where.
No, I think that's very helpful for people who are trying to plan this out for the first time and they're sitting there going, all right, wait, there's so many options, right? And I'm actually putting your travel media hat on. In terms of marketing for brands specifically, who are looking at runners, and let's say New York, Boston, Chicago, these are all pillars of those majors to a certain degree. What are some of the things that these travel brands should be doing to accommodate these guys? Because I feel like you mentioned like the Tharagons of the world. There's all these different things. And a lot of times travel, and especially hotels, they're just, we're just going to sell out. It's not a big deal. But especially in New York, there's so much product. Like, how do they, one, cater to the runner a little bit better so that they have a good experience, and then they come back when it's not a marathon? And then also, it'll allow them, one, proximity, but also allow them to provide a premium on that room whenever they come back. What are your thoughts around that? Because you've worked with a number of brands in the past, but what do you think travel and entertainment brands could do to attract that type of running audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a marketing lens, right? When I look at the consumer who's coming into one of these destinations, right, to experience this ordeal of a mission, they want to be catered. And so if I look at brands, how do I personalize the experience, right, to that consumer who's going into a hotel? What am I going to get when I actually go into the hotel? Could it be some energy drinks? Could it be some gels that you need, like to actually give you some potassium or sodium, right, to help you in terms of electrolytes, to help you actually in your run? How do I cater it from an experience, not just for the event, right? Because also, when I say an experience, you want to tailor that consumer to like that post-event, right? So what am I going to do after I actually get there? So it could be some type of voucher, right, that they could offer. Airlines, how they actually are catering to the consumer who's coming in. Now, not everybody's going to that destination, of course, is to run, but I think if you know who that consumer is, and in this day and age, right, when everything is all about personalization, if we can understand who the consumer is and what they've done and where they've traveled, you're going to look at it from a route of where they're going to, and they're also during a certain time of year of when they're looking to do it. So it might be like A plus B equals C, whereas it's, I'm running in October, I'm going to Chicago, and it could be really a perfect opportunity to target that consumer based on that they're going to be running the Chicago Marathon during that time. Same thing looking at like New York.
Yeah, you're the target.
Yeah, I am.
You, Neal, are the target. So how would you classify, or how would you describe that audience for a potential travel brand? Because it sounds like what you're saying is they should partner with other brands to pull them in and cater and personalize the experience. But this is it's not cheap to go to a marathon.
No.
So tell me a little bit about what you think the demographics are, whether you have the actual numbers or not, but you're living it.
Yeah. When you look at it from even international, right? So you have, I would say, 50,000 people who run the New York Marathon. Let's say half of them are actually coming from international, right? So the ideal hotel, airfare, they should bundle and offer, right, to that consumer based on where they're actually coming from, right? And then also from how they could partner probably with one of the organizations who was running the event, right? There could be some type of giveaway, some type of offering that they're actually giving to create this type of experience. As a consumer, I looked at it there and I'm like, okay, where do I find the right hotel that's in a proximity to what's going to be the best deal? Of course, you're spending a lot of money to actually go there.
Yeah.
So everybody's very deal conscious because you're already spending enough for the airfare, you're spending enough to actually book the hotel, and of course the training and the actual entry into the event.
What is the typical entry, just to give the audience a frame of reference?
Yeah, I think the application, correctly if I'm wrong, New York, I think it was about $175 to or maybe $200 for the application. If you don't get it, like if you're not submitted, you don't lose your money,
okay.
right? But if you are taken, then of course, then they do take your money. But the majors are probably the most expensive. Now, there are plenty of marathons that actually you can go and find throughout the course of the United States. RunningInTheUSA.com is a good site to look at your local events. They list it every week and also by state. They break it down from a mile race to a marathon. Those are great ways to look at it. From the majors, those are probably from a hotel experience. They should cater to the consumer because, as your point, from a B2B lens, they have an idea of who that consumer is, and they should be partnering with some of the local organizations and some of the local city council of, okay, how do we connect these consumers? Because, by the way, they are closing off basically the city for the day. So
citywide.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, the runners, the families of these runners, I would say they're middle class. They make X amount of dollars a year. They're obviously committed to doing this. They're a target, very niche target clientele for any brand.
Attention, sports fans, teams, and leagues, whether it's the season opener, playoffs, or the championship game, Bookseats.com makes getting there a breeze. With Bookseats, you can customize your ultimate sports travel package by bundling game tickets, flights, and hotels all in one easy-to-use platform. No hassle, no stress. Just you, the team, and the game day excitement. For professional sports organizations, Bookseats.com offers B2B solutions to create exclusive fan travel packages, increase fan engagement, build loyalty, and make every away game feel like home field advantage with professionally curated travel experiences. From diehard fans to professional leagues, Bookseats.com is your go-to partner for game-changing travel. Visit Bookseats.com today and make your next sports trip unforgettable. Bookseats, your all-access pass to the ultimate sports travel experience.
Your favorite artists, one click away. Skip the high fees. Skip the hassle. Lock in your seat now at tickets.expotravel.com. The stage is set. Visit tickets.expotravel.com. Your night out starts here. Your audience is listening, but are they engaged? At Expo Travel Media, we create professional, immersive podcasts that capture the attention and keep listeners coming back for more. From concept development to recording, editing, and distribution, we handle it all. So you can focus on what you do best, telling your story. Ready to launch or elevate your podcast? Let's make your voice heard. Visit us at expotravel.com. That's expotravel.com. And let's start the conversation. Have you ever seen a really good activation at any of these marathons where you're like, man, that was smart. That was this brand at this hotel, or just in general?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of it at the hotel. It's usually at an expo or at the start or finish line. And that's typically where you can get the consumer there. From the families who are at the event, I think it's ideal, right, for them to actually do that, to market it actually at their hotel location, right?
Yeah. I don't think they do it enough. I think maybe they do a deal with the road runners and they have information desks and stuff like that. But there's nothing stopping like a Theragun to go into each one of these hotels and say, hey, we'll pay you X amount. We're going to put something in folios, things of that nature. Because have you seen anything like that? Or?
It's been few and far between, I would say.
Yeah.
The activations aren't typically giving, some of them give vouchers, but those typically happen at the expos. When you're actually at the expo, you get a whole packet, right? And that includes your number and then all of the partners that are associated to the event, they'll give you something there. Now, it's not extending out beyond the actual expo. Part of it is tied to where I think the hotel could do a good job, or some of these local establishments could do a good job, is to be partnering with some of the local organizations. So like the BAA, which is like the Boston Athletic Association in Boston, or the New York Roadrunners Club, where the Marriotts of the world, or whoever. But I think there's a way to connect brands to the hotels or airfares or transits, right? It doesn't always have to be just in the actual...
Yeah, no, it's like I said, I've been doing these fan travel stories, and it keeps coming up where, like, Taylor Swift fans went to Scotland and the trams or the subway area was all Taylor.
Yeah.
And so even if you didn't get to go to the show, even if you're not participating in the marathon, you still feel like you're there. And that sort of appeals to the destination itself to attract that event producer every single year and so on and so forth. But I feel like you've got all 50,000 runners in New York City, for example. Maybe New York's not a great example, but maybe a smaller market where maybe they don't have the hotel inventory, but still could be impactful in terms of making this an opportunity for other businesses, whether it be restaurants or attractions or other experience providers within that destination to do well. So I'm just curious if you've heard of anything, or maybe you just had a thought like, hey, this would be a good idea because you've experienced the marathon in multiple markets, and what would have made it a little bit cooler?
I think local restaurants is something that people don't get involved in, right? When you're staying at a hotel, your thought process is, I'm going to have to eat at the hotel, right? So I think local restaurants out within a proximity, right, of the hotel and the actual start and finish line, those hotels can actually do a better job probably partnering with some of these local restaurants. If you look at let's say Denver or Nashville, or maybe a city that's not in the top 10, as I said, there are so many marathons, so many states that run, and each state has a large marathon that occurs every year. So the consumer is gonna, if they could run 50 states and 50 marathons, right, in their lifetime, not in a year, but there definitely would be an opportunity to go, I would say, with the local community, local restaurants, to have some type of, as I say, voucher. To me, I look at, as a consumer, right, the ideal scenario would be you go to the event and the experience continues on that journey. To me, it's about like this cycle, right? So I'm looking at it from I check into my hotel.
It's actually an offline customer journey.
Yeah.
Because in your world, all the agencies are talking about what's the customer journey from an online perspective. But what does it look like IRL?
Yeah, exactly. So when I look at it from an omni-channel, right, aspect of it, you're booking your trip online, right? You're then getting to the destination. You've booked your airfare, you've booked your hotel, right? I haven't really booked my activities, right? Because I'm not really sure exactly what I'm going to do, how I'm going to feel.
Yeah.
So from that level, like, you can go to Philadelphia and go, I want to go to tour of old Philadelphia, do a walking tour, or I can go and see a game or something.
But you'll jump into a big bus tour or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm probably not doing a lot before the actual event. But as you're at the event, you definitely want to participate and experience. You're not going to be there for a day. You're not going to fly in, as I say, the day before and go to the event and then fly out the day after, or that day. Yeah. So most of them start in the morning, early morning starts. So you have an opportunity to go get a big meal afterwards, and then have some type of excursion if you feel so good afterwards. And otherwise, you're there for the weekend. I would say the hotel or destination or DMO, right, is there out there, wants to be able to curate, right, an experience to the consumer as they are going to these destinations. That would be ideal for me, because then it's all really just set up for you, just on a silver platter. Here is what you can do. Here's an option, A, B, or C. Take it and check and go. And it could all be on an app, just hypotheticals here. I
think it's interesting to marry your marathon running experience with your professional experience. I talked to a festival promoter, and I said to him, one of the things that always comes up in these conversations, especially when you're talking about entertainment providers, is there's a metric that is always followed, especially I used to work for the biggest company in that realm. It's called vibes. Like, how do you create the vibes at that particular event? I would argue that there is a certain vibe of positivity, encouragement in that community when you're running the marathon. Mm-hmm. When I posed the question to this one promoter, he goes, but I know where it starts. And his story was, it starts with the artwork. It starts with the initial impression, because if you don't like the artwork, you're not going to click through, you're not going to buy a ticket, you're not going to be there. Now, these are institutions we're talking about in terms of marathons, but I guess from a visual communication perspective, as a runner yourself, if you were consulting a brand on how to appeal to runners who are going to these things, what are sort of those elements that you would think of that would say, hey, that's going to convert faster rather than just putting up a logo and a sign and that's it? What are some of those elements that you think would appeal to that community in particular?
As you're going on the journey of running in the marathon, Gatorade does great, right?
Sure.
So it's there throughout the course, right? BioFreeze is another one, right? Or some of these companies help for ear muscle relaxation. But I look at how I can interact with that brand. And like most brands are trying to get in front of the consumer. There's a big opportunity here based on the size of the event.
So you have what we're talking about is like sponsorship and activation, which then halos this effect, because if you like the artwork, the activation itself, you're going to put that on social media. You're going to tag friends in it. You're going to take photos with friends. You're going to tag them. And so you got this halo effect of different things that it's really hard to quantify to a brand. But that's what I'm getting at is like, what are those elements that really, and you said it actually, you're like, you want to be able to be a part of it, to experience it to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like touch and feel. So when you're social media and you're out there and you're running and people are using their phones and taking selfies on their whole marathon journey, and it is a journey, and they got to look at it like that way. The consumer, like me as a runner, right, I would go to these events, I would survey the scene, see the crowds and the experience, take it all in. As you're running, I don't run with any headphones.
Interesting.
I take it all in. Some of these events that you go to, especially like New York, Chicago, like they have bands throughout the whole event and they line the course. So that motivation, the energy is always there. So when I look at the brands, what they can actually do for me, it's more like, again, what you get in is what you get out, right? So you have to try it, taste it, feel it in that experience. Because again, you're not going to put something that's going to have an impact on your training.
Compromise the training.
Exactly. Correct. Right. Not compromise of your training nor of the event. You don't want to all of a sudden take something in the middle of the race and then you don't feel so great. So, and you have another 13 miles to go. So you want to think about that. And I think more of that is pre-event. During the event, you're totally in a zone, right? And so then it's like pre-post on that. You're not going to think about what else I could have eaten or what other gels I could have taken or energy supplements that I could have done. Nor most of it's done in training because I'm going to take a gel at mile 6 or take a gel at mile 10. So it's a kind of like, it's known in your mind, okay, I'm feeling a little sluggish at this time during my training. I'm going to actually take a energy gel that's going to help me get a little boost. Right. So there's a cadence of that as you're actually thinking about. So when brands like Theragun or others can be involved in it, it definitely should be a lead up into the event and then a recovery, right? Those Theragun and Hyperice is another one.
But I would even argue the hotel.
Oh, at the hotel, definitely.
Right? Like the hotel,
they make a mini one, right? So some of these things just an idea to those people out there, right, of a Theragun or a Hyperice, right? They do make a mini gun, right? A mini massage gun, right? It could be an opportunity to have that as a trial, right, at these hotels. That could be in close proximity. There's no doubt they're at the expo, but not everybody's going to stay at the expo for 6 or 8 hours, right? So there's a line, there's thousands of people that are there. So great opportunity, yes, to your point, would be at the hotel that they could use. Another thing is, again, it could be nutritional, right? So if you think about what they can eat beforehand and then clothing. So think about that from that lens. Most people are unsure of what to wear depending on when they go, right? So New York could be very cold or it could be very warm depending on...
Or raining.
Or raining, right?
Like this.
Yes.
Today.
So I ran Chicago with 72 degrees, right?
Oh, beautiful.
So but that's hot.
Yeah.
When you think about running is usually in the 50s or 60s, right? Yeah. So you have to make sure you're drinking enough fluid that you don't get dehydrated, right? You have to have enough, but you don't want to hydrate, right? So then, and it could have the inverse effect on it. But I ran also New York. One year it was 30 degrees with a 30 mile per hour wind, and another year it was 50 degrees. It completely depends. And then a couple of years ago, I think it was close to 70 degrees and it was very humid. It really
I remember.
depends.
Yeah. And so you're saying that the clothing brands, for example, could have an opportunity to, whatever weather it is, to have an impact on that runner by providing something. Is that at the hotel level? Yeah. Theragun could basically do a deal with all Marriotts or any hotel, literally have them in the rooms. And then just like taking something out of the minibar, if it's missing, we're going to charge you for it kind of thing. Or there's a certain giveaway that's associated to it. I was more thinking one of the key elements of marketing a hotel is comfort. And that, when you said recovery, I was like, oh, that's Starwood Heavenly Bed back in the day, right? Where they were just marketing that mattress as being the most comfortable mattress, which, by the way, it was really comfortable.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, we've stayed on those before. So what I was thinking was more the hotel themselves marketing. Hey, you're at Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, and we are a comfortable brand for recovery. So whenever you're thinking about strenuous activity or being competitive, this is the place to stay.
I'll give you another example of that, right? In terms of get my mind going as well. Think about recovery shoes, right? So you wear Crocs, you wear UFOs, and these maybe both have kids and they play basketball. So everybody I think shows up in their Crocs or UFOs, right? So, but it is an awesome feel, right? It feels like an egg crate on your feet after you ran 26 miles. So thinking about that, of recovery shoes, anything from a recovery afterwards, you sleep in a great bed, right? Your feet and body feel fantastic. You're wearing nice comfy clothes, right? All of that feels like the experience that you're getting. And to your point, relating to one of these establishments, right? They want to service you. They want to provide you with the experience and they want you to come back. So, like, how can they do that? And I think, to your point, I don't think they're doing a good enough job in connecting that runner as they are at the establishment versus just tailoring who they are as a brand. They're going to look at it as a general consumer than the actual individual of a marathon.
Yeah, but anybody with two legs is your target audience.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, if they're not part of in the running community, like my wife, kids went with me to Philly, and my wife went with me to be to Chicago. But like you have other people who are not running in the event, supporting the supportive team right there. You have another market, right, that these hotels and airlines should be targeting, not just the marathon runner who is there, right? There is a lot from that. I think it is endless in terms of where you're looking at it from who we can reach from a brand perspective. There are many.
Yeah, this is why it seems obvious as professionals in this world of online travel, media, all these different things, but you don't see them. And that's what I'm getting at is that you've been to 5 of these, you're an avid runner. There's probably a finite amount of brands who are targeted towards you, but was it ever Hyatt? Or was it actually, Neal, when you're thinking about finishing this marathon, all you want to do is get to your Hyatt hotel room and sleep and just rest and recover. I don't think that's true. That's why I brought it up. I feel like there's a missed opportunity where maybe they just pay me $1 million to consult them on how that happens. But there's these kind of micro markets because I believe that's what's happening now, especially in the age of social media, these various events. People are looking at these micro audiences, which effectively are much bigger, but you're essentially a super fan of running.
Yeah. I agree with you with that. Yeah. I think these hotels and airlines in the travel industry, just in general, I don't think they're marketing to the runner. I don't think they see it as the audience. And I think more because it's a finite window. So it's like I only have a couple days or so to reach them. Consumers not really coming in so far in advance. It's not like I'm going on taking a personal trip and I'm going on a vacation to Europe or wherever. So I actually have, this is a planned trip. When you're going to do a marathon, you're planning to actually do it, right? So it's months in advance of when you actually can market it. And I think to your point, the hotels might be saying, oh, your stay is coming up, and usually you get a reminder to check in. But when you're checking in, how is that customized to you?
Think of Nike, right? They have a running program. How many times have you been on a business trip and you get a run in? Would that be a determining factor as a runner? You've got a QBR presentation somewhere in Texas, and it's one brand versus another that's in proximity, and the one that caters to the runner and says, hey, we have Theraguns for your run as part of the amenities. Would that actually make you choose that hotel over another one?
That's a good question. There's social running, as you said.
Yeah.
The brands of the Nikes of the world tailor it to not the athletes that are out there, but the everyday consumer. And then, as you said, there's a business traveler and there's a leisure traveler, right? We're not focusing on all facets of that.
Because it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not so much event-based. The Super Bowls of a particular culture, but you run every day, Neal.
Yep.
And that's where I think travel, those guys don't cater, even if you're going to a music festival, for example, right? But if you're an avid runner or you're trying to be health conscious, it would be nice to know that there's an opportunity to run the track before the show or close to your hotel, or maybe there's a partnership with something. And I think because they think of it as event-based, it's not what Nike does as they're looking at the culture of running. They're looking at the lifestyle that's out there.
Yeah, and I think you have all these apps and watch apps that are there, the Garmin's, the Nikes, they have all their apps and all tied to their watches, and they can give you a map of where you're running, how long you're running, and anaerobic respiration in terms of the gauges that are there. And the reason I state all this is that all of that should be tied back to the hotel can then offer you something as you come back. So a lot of it's what they don't do is they don't geofence the consumer, right? And looking at it as just from a leisure perspective, you went out for a run around your area, and you're thinking about, okay, here's a great ad, right, that you could use, or this is something that's going to be refreshing right now to drink. And thinking about, I just came back from my run, how do I hydrate myself? What do I need to eat? What do I need? It was raining. It's going to rain tomorrow. Okay, maybe I need layers to actually go and buy it. Can I go into the local retailer down the street to actually buy it? And maybe the hotel can give you that type of messaging. But I think a lot of it has to do with who the customer profiles, the consumer, right? That's there. And hotels have that information, right? They have all that insight in terms of who you are and how you book and when you book and et cetera. So they should be able to tailor at least more the experience.
Or prior to similar to the event itself, the marathon itself, they could be asking these type of questions prior to check-in.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be for the marathon. Just could you are you a runner? Do you need to utilize the gym? Do you need these type of things where then it just gathers more data?
Yeah, and I think that the sharing experience that you have when somebody registers for it and understanding who that consumer is, what about them, the kind of choices that they're making as they're thinking about, hey, here's some options. And most of these organizations do give you options of hotels that are close to the start and finish line, but they give you discounts in terms of what it is, but they don't give you no rhyme or reason why. So these are just partners of the actual organization versus the ones you're talking about, or an opportunity there could be okay, activity wise, what can we do? What can we provide to the consumer in their room as they are leading up to actually their trip? Could be even something that they send to them via email, right? Yep. To them. So how do you market that consumer and post transaction? And that's our days of Expedia of looking at it from that lens. Yes, you got the person who's going to buy the hotel room. When I worked there, it was more about how do I connect to that consumer as they actually book their trip, right? I want to be able to offer them, if I need something, here's the pharmacy down the street, or here's something that I might need. Maybe you need Advil, maybe you need Aleve or something like that, right? So all of that, I can be part of I keep going back to experience, but it is an experience that I don't think hotel the Airs are doing great right now.
Or just travel brands in general. Like that's what I was trying to get at. No, every time I hang out with you, Neal, like I learn a little bit of something. And I think that there's an opportunity to educate brands in general, but even from a local level, right? Like that local restaurant or that attraction, they should be finding different ways to cater to a runner, because it's not just about the event. It's the lifestyle. It's the culture of it. And it could be a determining factor on that business or leisure trip if you're going back to that city as to how to market to them. So that's where I was getting at.
There are a lot of sports that people can play and participate in. Like the easiest thing is for somebody to go out and start to go for a run.
Just run. So
it's one of the healthiest ways of exercise. How do you then cater to that individual from experience that they're going at the event or leading up to the event? That's going to make their experience even better. Because to your point, like most of these hotels, or if they have I like to say, if you had a good first date, you'll come back and have a better second date. So like, how do you get the consumer to come back in once they've had that experience, whether it's in a different city, right? Yeah. So if I stayed at my Marriott in X or stayed at my Hyatt or Hilton, right, in X location, how then that's going to make me feel good about them and their experience. And they always ask surveys about it, right? Yep. So like, okay, and then I'm going to come back the next time around to go have that same experience at a different location, whether it's for business or leisure, right?
Yeah.
That they're going to.
Yeah, so they should be treating... And it is really hard to execute on this, and it's easier said than done. Sure. The New York City Marathon is really just a tent pole to hopefully market this halo effect. If I'm Hyatt Hotels and I do a really good campaign on that guy who ran or his family members who ran are going to go to another Hyatt or another destination where there's a Hyatt. It's going to be like, hey, they cater to runners.
I agree with you. Like if you walk into the hotel and you get a welcome kit, and that is all tailored to, these guys make me feel very...
The community.
Yeah, of the running community. You're going to go back to them every single time. You have looking at different races throughout the whole world or the country. Most of these are global brands. Most of them are able to attract to the consumer in any of these destinations. So I think for me as a runner, if I saw it if somebody gave me exactly like what I needed, I'm going to come back. Always be
marathon or not.
Yeah, exactly. As a consumer, like the goal is conversion, right? As you stated, right? Hotels need to get people in the beds, right? The airlines need to get people in the seats. Why would I go book one versus the other, right? Because of the type of experience that I got. And tailoring it to me as a runner, right? I get there. Maybe it's a free massage. Maybe it's something like that they offer. It's something that's going to give me a spiff, right? That's going to lure me to come back. And then, as you say, whether you're there with your family or yourself, you feel good, right? So once you've gone through that whole process and you're all done, then you might be tired the next day, but you've then had that whole accomplishment, right? And then they're tailoring you to what your needs are, right? So it makes you feel good.
No, and also it ties back into the emotion of that accomplishment and associating it with the brand and the recovery and all these things. I think they think of it in a vacuum of, that's just marathon weekend.
I think you're right. I think there's some marathons that are like 4,000 people, right? So like, how do I reach them? How do I reach the masses, right? That are there. And I think as I stated before, I think it's a moment in time that they're trying to, that they don't feel it's a huge need for them.
I don't think it's as impactful as it actually is, not just to the runner, but to the surrounding family, the friends, everybody.
It's a trickle-down effect. If I was able to give them what they wanted and they give me what I wanted and able to curate to me what I need, there's going to be an interest for me to actually purchase products. So again, whether it's a CPG brand, whether it's a retail brand, or we're talking retail establishment I'm going to, whether it's a energy drink, whether it's clothing, etc. I think all of that is front and center to the consumer, and it's going to be a remembrance, right, on that day, because you've then done the day, right? Everybody remembers their first marathon. Everybody remembers the race that happened and what happened afterwards, what happened beforehand.
Yep.
So
it's a core memory. It's a core memory, which I will never have. I'm going to live vicariously through your core memories, Neal. But I thank you for putting your input as a travel media sales professional at the leadership level, by the way, but also just as a runner, right? I think that's very important. So what do you think? Give me your top 3 things. If you're talking to a brand who wants to market to runners, what are the kind of the top 3 things you would encourage them to do, or at least think about into their next campaign season?
Yeah. Most of these brands do a ton of research, right, on who the consumer and core individual is. I don't think, especially in the running community, I don't think they're leveraging that area. I think that they got to understand who is that consumer. There's a huge age bracket that could be anywhere from 18 years old to 60 plus. So it's a very broad demographic that you're reaching. So if you are reaching and looking at the masses, that is a huge opportunity for them to partake in. Number 2, right, when I look at some of these hotel establishments, I would encourage those hotels, the travel industry, to actually reach out to some of these brands during these events and be able to leverage their resources and be able to figure out a connection that the two of them can do in order to lure potential sales for these brands. And then 3, I think they should get more involved in the running community just in general. Like in terms of what I'm doing, like I have my own Instagram account. It's running Silver Fox Running USA. Please check me out. But in the industry, in terms of the community and trying to provide tips and encouragement to the whole running community, I think part of that is to look at the running community as an area, especially some of these brands, to get involved in. I don't think they're doing a good enough job today. I would encourage them to lean into this particular target audience because it is a very lucrative opportunity for them.
Awesome. Thanks for coming to Tickets to Travel. I think you hit it right on the head. That if you need to learn more about the running community and if you're a brand who's interested, we'll check it out on Silver Fox Running. Thank you again, Neal, for coming in. All right, folks, and that's a wrap on this leg of the journey. Big thanks to Neal Sheridan for running with us all day. Figuratively and literally, from media sales to marathon medals, Neal gave us a full course view of what it means to be a traveler with purpose and how planning around a marathon can be just as important as the race itself. For destinations and DMOs, the message is clear. If you're hosting a marathon, you're not just organizing a race, you're curating a citywide experience. And that experience starts long before the starting gun. From hotel proximity to local restaurant partnerships to personalized recovery amenities, the opportunity to connect with runners and their support crews is massive and largely untapped. To marathoners, especially those thinking about their first big run, take Neal's advice. Train hard, plan smart, and treat the travel like part of the journey. From the expo energy to the post-race rest, every detail matters. And yeah, you will be sore, so pack the Crocs. And for brands, the runner isn't just a niche audience, it's a lifestyle market. These folks are committed, passionate, and travel ready. From compression gear to comfy beds, electrolytes to hotel activations, there's so much room for creative engagement. Just don't wait until the race day. You can follow Neal's running and recovery journey at Silver Fox Running USA on Instagram. Give him a shout or maybe a gel pack. Because whether you're in it for the glory, the cause, or the challenge, it is clear. The marathon is more than a moment. It's a movement. I'm Mario Bedouin, and this has been Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. Until next time, keep moving, keep planning, and as always, we'll see you at the finish line.
Attention travel and ticketing innovators. Whether you're a startup disrupting the industry or an established company ready to take your distribution strategy to the next level, Expo Travel is your ultimate partner in online travel and ticketing distribution. We specialize in helping businesses of all sizes optimize their operations, expand their reach, and unlock new revenue streams. And for startups looking to grow, we partnered with top venture capital syndicates to help you secure the funding you need to turn bold ideas into thriving businesses. From refining businesses to scaling operations and raising capital, Expo Travel is here to drive your success. Visit Expo Travel today. That's xpotravel.com for a consultation. And let's transform the way the world travels, one innovation at a time. Expo Travel, because the future of travel and ticketing starts with you.